Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be talking about Azure Firewall, and we're going to be doing a setup lab. Couple things about Azure Firewall. It does stateful packet inspection that is managed by Azure. It scales fast and is highly available. It also has native integration with other Azure services like RBAC, policies, and tags. So, why would you want to use it? Well, Azure Firewall creates a layer between you and the internet and your private VMs. So if you've got a critical workload that's hosted in a private subnet, you're going to create a layer that allows you and just you or anybody in your company to access it via the internet and not any malicious actors. So let's get started. All right, for this lab, we're going to want to have a virtual machine. I went ahead and already created one, very basic, called the demo VM. It's created a Azure resource group for it called Azure Demo. It's currently running in East US and has Windows on it. Very standard, very basic. Let's go ahead and click on it. The next thing we're going to want to do is go to Virtual Network Subnet. Click on that. This will take you to the subnet group and go down to subnets under settings. Click on that. And we're going to want to go ahead and create a subnet for the firewall. Go ahead and click on subnet. I'm going to call this Azure Firewall Subnet. This is going to allocate a subnet address range different from the one in the demo VM. Everything else we can leave standard. Click on save. This is going to go ahead and create that subnet. This is went ahead and created it. Now we can go back to our dashboard. You can either go here to firewalls, or you can go ahead and create resource and then type in firewall. Click on the Microsoft firewall. As you can see, there are other firewalls, but for this one, we're going to want to go create the Microsoft one. Go ahead and create. All right, so we're going to want to go ahead and put it in the same exact resource group as our demo VM. I'll call this Azure Firewall. Very creative. Put it in the exact same US East region, if East US. We're going to use the standard tier. Premium's very expensive. And we're going to use Classic. And we'll use classic policies to manage this firewall. We're also going to want to use an existing virtual network because we had already gone ahead and added the subnet, and we already have a virtual network in which we want to put this firewall in. We're going to go ahead and select Azure Demo VNet. That's the one we want to use, and we're going to have to create a new IP address. I'll go ahead and call it Azure Firewall IP. Select OK. All right, everything else looks great. We don't need to add tags, so we can skip that step to review and create. Now, this is going to take some time to deploy, so the validation is passed. We'll go ahead and select Create. After this gets fully deployed with the IP address and the configuration, I will come back. All right, the firewall finished deploying. I'll go ahead and copy the firewall private IP address, and we'll go back to the main dashboard. I'll select create a resource, and in this we're actually going to go ahead and type in route table, and we're going to create a route table. The reason we're going to create a route table is because we're going to want to route all the traffic from the network to the internet through the firewall. So select route table for Microsoft, select create. We'll put it in the same resource group and in the same region. And I'll call it firewall route table. We'll leave that selected as yes. Select review and create. It should only take a couple of seconds to create. And after this is done creating, what we're going to go ahead and do is add a route that with the address prefix of 0.0.0/0, and we're going to make the next hop virtual appliance, and we're going to give the firewall IP address. So let's go to the resource. we'll go down to routes under settings, select routes, select add. We'll call it firewall route. Again, it's going to be 0.0.0.0/0. This basically says any address from anywhere can be routed, and we will select our virtual appliance, copy and paste the firewall private IP into here, select OK, and that's going to go ahead and create the route. Now, we'll go back to the firewall route and select subnets. It successfully added the route. That's good. Now we'll go to subnets under settings, go to associate. We're going to associate this firewall table with the Azure Demo VNet and select the default subnet. We'll go ahead and select OK. This is going to save the route, and it's going to go ahead and create it. So basically, this route is now associated with that default subnet. Let's go back to the main. We'll go to firewalls, go to our Azure Firewall, and then we're going to go to rules and classic, because again, we created a classic firewall. We'll go ahead and create a NAT rule, and we will call it VM rule. We'll just call it VM rule. And we can give it a priority of 100 so it doesn't get affected by any of the other priority rules. We'll call it VM rule. We'll select TCP. We'll select an IP address. Now, for the source, can you guess what would be the source of the IP address? Well, in this case, I'm going to select my IP address as the source. So if you type in what's in my IP, you can just get it from Google itself. I'll go ahead and copy and paste that in. And our destination address, can you take a guess as to what that would be? I'll let you guess. It's actually going to be your firewall public IP address. So I'll go back to firewalls, click on Azure Firewall. I'll grab the public IP address, so we'll go to public IP configuration, go ahead and grab that IP, and you can throw it in as the destination address, and I'll call it a 4000 destination port. This is basically any port that isn't specifically allocated to any service like 3389, which is our RDP port. So the translated port is going to be 3389, and your translated IP address is going to be your demo's VM, or well, in my case, demo VM IP address. So let's go ahead and review this again. It's probably got a space. Yep. Okay. So we called the VM rule, selected TCP, not UDP, TCP, IP address, not a group. We've got my IP address, my public IP address from my house, from my ISP here in Raleigh, North Carolina, or Cary, North Carolina. The destination address is your public firewall IP address, and we allocated a 4000 port, just a random port basically. And the translated address, basically the address that the traffic's intended for, is the demo VM IP address, private IP address, and we are targeting the 3389 or the remote desktop protocol port address. Go ahead and select add. Now that's going to go ahead and create the demo, the NAT rule. It's going to take a second, so we'll come back once that's fully created and deployed. All right, as you guys can see, the firewall successfully updated. We'll go ahead and close that out. That means this VM rule is now in place, the one we had just created. We can now open RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, and we should now be able to type in 20.106.246.125, that little symbol, and 4000. I forget the name of it. I think it's colon. And we should be able to connect. Now this IP address right here is the public IP address of the firewall, and 4000 is again the port that we specified in this rule. So if we click on this rule, we should be able to see this is the firewall IP and this is the destination port. We'll go ahead and hit connect. use the user account that you had defined on your VM with the password. Hit select yes, and now this should load up the VM. Alright, as you guys can see, it's taking a second, but it's currently loading the VM. And I'll just go ahead and run a command to show you that we're in the correct VM. Alright, demo VM. Again, this is through the public IP address that the firewall has, and we are now remoted into a VM through the firewall. I'll go ahead and show you that I have not added a public IP address to the VM, just so you guys understand that it's actually running with a private only IP address. As you can see, there's no public IP address. This is remoted in right through the firewall in a very secure and stable manner. Well, thank you guys for watching. Subscribe and like down below. Thank you.